Everyone feared the wicked teacher until a strange child arrived and exposed her secret. "Stretch out your hand, the other one. You think I'm playing with you today?" Everyone feared Madam Obiageli. The teachers feared her. The gateman who had worked at Mmiriọma Primary for 23 years feared her. Even the rats in the storage room scattered when her footsteps echoed down the corridor. But one strange child didn't fear her at all. Imagine scraping together 180,000 naira a term, selling your late mother's gold wrapper, borrowing from the thrift society, begging your brother in Italy so your gifted daughter could learn English and basic science, only for that same daughter to come home 3 months later unable to spell her own name. Welcome to Mmiriọma Primary Academy, Enugu State, where the motto above the gate read, "Breeding Excellence since 1987. But the children who entered those gates weren't being bred for excellence. They were being harvested. Madam Obiageli was officially the head teacher of lower primary. But her real power came from one fact everyone whispered, but nobody dared say aloud. She was the blood sister of Chief Ikechukwu Mbalisi, the man who owned the school, the land, and half the town. She walked Mmiriọma's corridors like she had the children's destinies folded inside her wrapper, which, as it turned out, she did. A heavy-set woman draped in expensive traditional attire, her neck weighted with coral and ivory beads she never removed. Her eyes flashed reddish-orange when her temper rose. Her cane, called Oku Onwu, fire of death, had made children wet themselves. For 15 years, nobody could touch her. Until the boy arrived, small, quiet, wearing an oversized linen shirt and a strange pendant, eyes that shimmered gold when light hit them wrong. His name was Zimuzo Ekwueme, and he was about to expose what Madam Obiageli had been stealing all along. Let me tell you about Madam Obiageli Nwankwo, so you understand what kind of creature we're dealing with. She had been at Mmiriọma Primary Academy for 15 years, 15 years of terror, 15 years of children waking up at night, screaming her name, 15 years of parents wondering why their bright children came home different. The woman was built like a bulldozer, wrapped in Ankara, heavy-set, broad-shouldered, with a permanent scowl carved into her face like it was placed there by an angry god. She wore traditional attire that cost more than most teachers earned in 3 months. Elaborate wrappers, navy blouses with golden embroidery, and a towering rainbow gel that added another foot to her already imposing height. But it was the jewelry that made you look twice. Around her neck hung layer upon layer of coral and ivory beads, red and cream strands clicking together when she walked. She touched them constantly, fingers stroking the beads like a Catholic fingering rosary. Those beads never came off, not during school hours, not during holidays, not during the one time a student accidentally spilled water on her and she nearly committed murder in the corridor. Nobody questioned why. And her eyes? Children whispered that they glowed red when she was angry. Teachers dismissed this as childish nonsense until they saw it themselves and quickly learned to look away. She carried her cane everywhere. Polished Iroko wood, smooth from 15 years of use, nicknamed Oku Onwu by students who knew its kiss too well. Fire of death. Because something in you died after she was done with you, something you couldn't name. Something you'd never get back, and nobody, not teachers, not parents, not even the education board, could do anything about it. Because Madam Obiageli was the blood sister of Chief Ikechukwu Mbalisi, and Chief Mbalisi owned everything. Now every school has slow learners, every class has children who struggle with multiplication tables or forget their English spellings. That's normal. But what was happening at Mmiriọma Primary Academy was not normal. Take Tobena Okafor. At 7 years old, he represented Enugu State at the National Cowbell Mathematics Competition. At 8, he was solving algebraic equations secondary school students couldn't touch. Teachers called him calculator. The boy's brain was a machine. Then Madam Obiageli chose him. Nobody knew what happened exactly. One afternoon, she kept him back after school for extra lessons. When his twin sister Adauria came to find him 2 hours later, Tobena was sitting on the floor of the staff room, staring at his hands like he'd never seen fingers before. That was 3 years ago. Today, Tobena was 12 years old, still in primary 4, and couldn't count past 20. Or take Chinenye Udeze. That girl could write poetry that made grown women weep at PTA meetings. Her English teacher had started saving money to sponsor her for a national writing competition. Then she scored highest in a class test, higher than the headmaster's nephew. Madam Obiageli kept her back for discipline. 3 days later, Chinenye couldn't string a sentence together. She'd open her mouth to speak and nothing would come. The words had simply left. Or Somtochukwu, who had a full scholarship waiting at King's College, Lagos. The boy was going places. Everyone said so. Until he wasn't going anywhere at all. His parents took him to every hospital in the southeast. Doctors ran tests, found nothing wrong. Pastors prayed, native doctors consulted, holy water sprinkled. Nothing worked. Somtochukwu would sit in class, staring at a blank wall for hours, occasionally muttering words nobody understood. 15 years of this, dozens of brilliant children reduced to husks, and nobody connected the dots. Zimuzo Ekweme arrived at Mmiriọma Primary on a Monday morning in the middle of September. He came in a rickety keke napep that coughed black smoke, seated beside an uncle who had barely spoken 10 words to him during the 4-hour journey from Arochukwu. The man's name was Okechukwu, a distant cousin of Zimuzo's late father, and he wore his resentment openly. "This is the school," the uncle said, not looking at him. "Don't cause trouble. Don't embarrass me. Your grandmother is dead. Nobody is coming to save you if you misbehave." Zimuzo said nothing. He climbed out of the keke, clutching a battered Ghana must-go bag containing everything he owned. 2 shirts, 1 pair of trousers, a worn Bible his grandmother never read but kept anyway, and a faded photograph of a woman with kind eyes. Around his neck hung a pendant on a leather cord, circular, carved with symbols that seemed to shift if you stared too long. It had been pressed into his palm as his grandmother took her last breath. "Zimuzo, anya gina ahu ihendi ozo na apugi ihu, jiri hachebe umuwaka." Your eyes see what others cannot. Use them to protect children. He hadn't understood then. He was beginning to now. The students noticed him immediately. Of course they did. The faded oversized shirt, the dusty sandals, the fact that he looked like he'd missed several meals. But most of all, they noticed his eyes. In normal light, they appeared deep brown, but when shadows fell across his face, they shimmered gold, unnatural, unsettling. "See as him eye they shine?" one boy whispered. "Maybe na Ogbanje," another replied. Zimuzo heard them. He always heard them. He'd spent 10 years being called witch child, cursed, strange. He'd learned to keep his head down, to stay invisible. But something in this school felt wrong. A heaviness in the air, a darkness coiled beneath the ordinary, and it was watching him. It happened on his 3rd day. Morning assembly at Mmiriọma Primary was a ritual of controlled terror. 600 students stood in crooked lines under the blazing sun, while teachers prowled between rows, hunting for untucked shirts, unpolished shoes, any excuse to make an example. But everyone knew who the real predator was. Madam Obiageli emerged from the staff room at exactly 7:45 a.m., her rainbow gel towering above the crowd like a warning flag. The coral beads clicked against her chest with each heavy step. Oku Onwu gleamed in her right hand. The assembly fell deathly silent. She walked slowly through the rows, eyes scanning, searching. Students held their breath as she passed. Even teachers looked elsewhere. Then she stopped. A small girl named Adaugo stood trembling in the second row. Her crime was invisible to everyone except Madam Obiageli, a shirt slightly untucked at the back, fabric that had shifted during the walk to school. "You," Madam Obiageli breathed, "come out here." Adaugo's legs nearly buckled as she stepped forward. Tears were already forming. Madam Obiageli raised Oku Onwu high above her head, preparing to strike, and Zimuzo's pendant exploded with green light. He gasped. His eyes blazed gold, so bright that students near him stumbled backward, and suddenly he saw. The necklace, the coral and ivory beads weren't jewelry. They were a prison. Inside each bead swirled a trapped light, a child's essence, pressing against its tiny cage. Dozens of them, weeping, screaming without sound. Children's futures, children's minds, children's destinies, stolen, caged, worn as decoration. Zimuzo's gasp echoed across the silent assembly. Madam Obiageli's head snapped toward him. Their eyes met. And for the first time in 15 years, the most feared woman in Enugu State felt something she had forgotten existed. Fear. Her cane lowered slowly. Her face twitched. "Assembly dismissed," she whispered hoarsely. Then she fled. Adoria found him behind the guava trees during long break. Most students had been avoiding Zimuzo since assembly. The story of his glowing eyes had spread through the school like harmattan fire. Children whispered that he was Ogbanji, that he was possessed, that he had stared down Madam Obiageli and made her run. But Adoria walked straight toward him. She was sharp-featured, angular, with the kind of intensity that made people uncomfortable. Her school uniform was immaculate, but her eyes carried 3 years of sleepless nights. "What did you see?" No greeting, no introduction, just the question, fired like a bullet. Zimuzo studied her face. "Who are you?" "Answer me first." She stepped closer. "This morning, when your eyes did that thing, when she looked at you and ran, what did you see?" Zimuzo's hand moved instinctively to his pendant. He had spent his entire life hiding, denying, pretending to be ordinary. His grandmother had warned him. People fear what they don't understand. But something in this girl's eyes, desperation mixed with fierce, burning hope, made him pause. "Why do you want to know?" Adoria reached into her school bag and pulled out a worn notebook, its pages swollen from years of use. She thrust it toward him. "Because I've been waiting 3 years for someone who could see what I couldn't." Zimuzo opened the notebook, page after page of obsessive documentation. Names, dates, descriptions. Which children were brilliant before? When exactly they changed? What happened in the days leading up to their transformation? "My brother Tobena is in there," Adoria said quietly. "Page 23. He was my twin, my other half. He was going to represent Nigeria in mathematics." Her voice cracked. "Now he doesn't recognize my face." She met Zimuzo's golden eyes without flinching. "So I'll ask you again. What did you see?" Zimuzo looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke. "I saw where your brother went." Madam Obiageli did not sleep that night. She lay in her bed, the coral and ivory beads still around her neck. She never removed them, not even for sleep, and stared at the ceiling fan rotating slowly above her. Those eyes, that boy's golden eyes, he had seen her. Not looked at her, seen her, seen through the wrapper of respectability she had worn for 15 years, seen past the jewel and the expensive jewelry and the title of head teacher, seen what she truly was. By Wednesday, she had made her decision. The boy had to be broken. Better yet, the boy had to be taken. A child with genuine spiritual sight, with Dibia blood running through his veins? That kind of essence was rare. Wealthy men in Lagos would pay 20 million naira for such a prize. Maybe more? She started small. Public humiliations, accusing him of offenses he didn't commit, making him kneel on concrete during the hottest hours. Zimuzo endured it all in silence, face expressionless. Then she escalated. On Friday, she caught him alone in the corridor and swung Oku Onwu at his open palm with all her strength. The cane exploded into splinters. Madam Obiageli stared at the broken handle in her fist. The Iroko wood, 15 years of faithful service, had shattered like dry biscuit against his skin. Zimuzo's palm didn't have a single mark. That night, she traveled to Okija to consult the native doctor who had initiated her. She brought Zimuzo's handwriting sample, stolen from his classwork. The old man's face went grey when he held the paper. This child carries Arachukwu blood, old blood, Dibia lineage. He thrust the paper back at her. Leave him alone. Leave him or he will be your end. Madam Obiageli smiled. Or, she said softly, he will be my greatest harvest yet. They met behind the abandoned water tank where teachers never ventured. 4 children, 4 reasons to want Madame Obiageli destroyed. Zimuzo had told Adauria everything about his grandmother's legacy, about his site, about what the coral beads truly contained. She had listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she didn't call him mad or possessed. She said, "How do we free them?" Now they sat in a circle on dusty concrete, voices low, heads bent together like conspirators planning a coup, which, in a way, they were. Adauria had recruited 2 others. Kosiso Chukwu was the pastor's son, a quiet boy who had watched his cousin fade into emptiness 2 years ago. When his father said, "Pray about it," something in Kosiso had broken. He was done praying. He wanted justice. Uzomaka had been Somtochukwu's best friend since primary 1. The day he forgot her name, she had gone home and cried for 6 hours straight. She hadn't cried since. Tears had been replaced by cold, patient anger. "So the beads are prisons," Kosiso said slowly. "Each one holds a child's chai." "Their essence," Zimuzo confirmed, "their brilliance, their future. She drains it during the beatings, some kind of ritual." "And she sells it," Adauria added bitterly, "to rich people whose children are failing." Uzomaka's jaw tightened. "How do we break the necklace?" "That's the problem." Zimuzo touched his pendant. "It can only shatter when she's actively channeling, when her spiritual defenses are down. And even then, we need witnesses, hundreds of them. Otherwise, people will explain away whatever they see." Silence fell over the group. Then Adauria smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile. "Independence Day," she said. "October 1st. The whole community will be there. Parents, chiefs, local government, her brother." "We make her attack in public," Uzoamaka understood, "in front of everyone." Kosiso leaned forward. "But how do we make her angry enough to expose herself?" All 3 looked at Zimuzo. His golden eyes glinted. "We give her what she wants most. Me." October 1st arrived, wrapped in harmattan haze and nervous energy. Mmiriọma Primary Academy had been transformed. Canopies dotted the assembly ground, plastic chairs arranged in neat rows. The Nigerian flag hung limp in the still air. A banner proclaimed, "Nigeria at 64, celebrating unity and progress." By 9 a.m., the compound was overflowing. Parents in expensive lace and starched agbada. Local government officials mopping sweat from their foreheads. Traditional rulers with feathered caps and coral beads of their own. Journalists from the community radio station. And in the center of the front row, beaming with proprietary satisfaction, sat Chief Ikechukwu Mbalisi, owner of the school, owner of the land, owner of the town. His sister sat beside him. Madam Obiageli was resplendent in her finest attire, rainbow gel towering impossibly high, coral and ivory necklace gleaming against her chest. She had been waiting for this day. The boy had evaded her for weeks, but today, surrounded by her brother's power, she felt invincible. The cultural presentations began. Dancers twirled, children recited poetry. A drama group performed a skit about national unity that made the politicians clap politely. Then came the moment. Adauria's cultural dance group took the stage. Halfway through the performance, she stumbled. lost deliberately, lost knocking over a decorated pot, disrupting the choreography, creating chaos. Madam Obiageli shot to her feet. Foolish girl, you have disgraced this school. She stormed toward the performance area, oku onwu in hand, a new cane, freshly carved after the last one shattered. The crowd murmured. Chief Imbalisi frowned, but didn't intervene. Adoria stood her ground, trembling but defiant. Madame Obiageli raised the cane. Loss. She didn't do anything. The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Zimuzo stepped forward from the crowd, arms crossed, golden eyes already beginning to glow. You want someone to punish? He walked toward her slowly. I'm right here. Madam Obiageli's eyes flashed red-orange. The boy, finally, offering himself before the entire community. She could discipline him publicly, drain him, and no one would see anything except a teacher correcting a rude student. You dare interrupt me? She smiled, that slow, terrible smile. Kneel! Make me! Gasps rippled through the crowd. Madam Obiageli's smile vanished. Rage contorted her features. She raised oku onwu high and began whispering, an incantation only Zimuzo could hear, ancient words that preceded the draining ritual. She swung. Zimuzo's pendant erupted. The light was blinding, pure, searing white and green, forcing the crowd to shield their eyes. Zimuzo didn't flinch. He pushed back with everything his grandmother had taught him, everything the ancestors had placed in his blood. The coral and ivory necklace didn't just break. It exploded. Beads scattered like shrapnel, and from each shattered bead, a glowing orb burst free. Children's chi, children's stolen futures, spiraling upward like a swarm of golden fireflies before rocketing outward into the crowd. People screamed. Children convulsed in their seats as light slammed back into their chests. Tobena, seated beside his weeping mother, jerked upright. His vacant eyes cleared. He grabbed Adoria's hand with sudden, desperate strength. Ada? His voice cracked. Ada, what happened? Where am I? Across the assembly ground, Somtochukwu began sobbing, words tumbling out of his mouth for the first time in 2 years. Chinenye gasped and whispered a line of poetry. And Madam Obiageli? The crowd watched in frozen horror as 15 years caught up with her in 15 seconds. Her skin wrinkled and collapsed. Her hair whitened and fell in clumps. Her body shrank, twisted, withered, until what remained was not a woman, but a creature, ancient, skeletal, barely human. Her true form, her true age, her true emptiness. She crumpled to the ground, clawing at the dirt where her beads had fallen, babbling words no one understood. Chief Ikechukwu Mbalisi stared at the thing that had been his sister. His face was the color of ash. The police arrived within the hour. Nobody stopped them. Not even Chief Ikechukwu Mbalisi, who sat frozen in his plastic chair, staring at the skeletal creature being loaded into a van. The thing that had once been his sister, now babbling and clawing at air, begging for beads that no longer existed. He had seen it. Everyone had seen it. There was nothing to deny, nothing to explain away, nothing to cover up with money or influence or whispered threats. The story spread across Enugu state before nightfall. By morning, it had reached Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, everywhere Madam Obiageli had sold her stolen goods. Wealthy families quietly disposed of strange powders and oils they had purchased over the years. Some children in distant cities woke up suddenly sharper, suddenly themselves again, and their parents never spoke of why. At Mmiriọma Primary Academy, the healing began slowly. Tobena sat with his sister under the guava trees, relearning multiplication tables. Sometimes he cried from frustration. Sometimes he laughed when a memory surfaced. Birthdays, holidays, the smell of their mother's jollof rice. Adoria held his hand through all of it. Somtochukwu's scholarship to King's College was reinstated after his story reached the newspapers. The boy who couldn't string sentences together 3 weeks ago was now giving interviews about educational reform. Chinenye wrote a poem about light returning to dark places. Her teacher wept when she read it. Chief Imbalisi resigned from the school board. He sold the land to the state government for a fraction of its worth. Some said guilt had broken him. Others said he simply couldn't bear to see the place where his sister's true nature had been revealed. Zimuzo visited his grandmother's grave on a quiet Sunday. The journey back to Arochukwu took 4 hours. He went alone, carrying nothing but his pendant and a bundle of fresh palm fronds. The grave was simple, a mound of red earth beneath an udara tree, marked with a wooden cross his grandmother wouldn't have wanted, but the villagers had insisted upon. He knelt in the dirt. "Mama Nuku," he whispered. "I was afraid. My whole life, I was afraid of what I am. I thought these eyes were a punishment, something that made me wrong, made me different." The pendant pulsed softly against his chest. "But you knew. You always knew." He placed the palm fronds on the grave. "These eyes are not for me. They are for the ones who cannot protect themselves." A warm breeze stirred the udara leaves. Somewhere in the branches a bird began to sing. Zimuzo smiled. 3 weeks later, first day of the new term, Mmiriọma Primary Academy had a new head teacher, a kind woman from Nsukka who smiled at students instead of hunting them. The assembly ground felt different now, lighter. Children actually laughed during break time. Zimuzo walked through the gates, pendant resting calm against his chest. His uncle had softened toward him since the incident, even offered to buy him new school uniforms, which Zimuzo had politely accepted. He was heading toward his classroom when a small figure darted into his path. A girl, maybe 6 years old, with oversized glasses and 2 puffs of hair. A new student, clearly. Her uniform was too stiff, her eyes too wide. "Senior!" She bounced on her heels. "Senior, is it true? Everyone is saying, they're saying you can see things nobody else can see. Is it true?" Zimuzo looked down at her. 3 months ago, he would have denied it, would have shrugged and walked away, kept his head down, stayed invisible. But he wasn't that boy anymore. "What's your name?" "Chimamanda, Senior." "Chimamanda." He crouched so their eyes were level. "If you ever see something wrong happening in this school, something that scares you, something that doesn't feel right, you come find me, okay?" Her eyes widened. "Okay, Senior." He straightened up and smiled, warm, gentle, the kind of smile his grandmother used to give him when he'd done something brave. "As for what I can see," he touched his pendant lightly, "I see enough." Did this story grip you? Did you feel your heart race when Zimuzo faced Madam Obiageli? Then do me a small favor. It takes 3 seconds. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That's how you make sure you never miss stories like this one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, a friend, a sister, a parent, share it with them. You never know whose eyes you might open. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were Zimuzo? Would you have hidden your gift or used it? I'm reading every single comment. Until next time.